Hi, everybody. Will here with this week's interview chair. This week, this man needs no introduction. Michael Canalizo. Sit back and you're going to be thoroughly entertained. Trust me. Hi, everybody.
Right.
Will Alexander here with the interview chair with this man needs no introduction. Hello, Michael Canalizo. How are you?
Well, I've been awoken by the Canadian interviewer, so I guess I'm fine.
Oh, it's the same time down there as it is up here.
That is true.
Yeah. So before we get into the interview, let's talk about what's coming up. The AKC event is coming up. So
That's right. I'm the nuts and bolts guy behind it. I've been for a number of years the event manager, part of the event management team between Royal Canin and the American Kennel Club to do everything that puts the show together. And that's what we're in the midst of. We have another record breaking entry in Orlando coming
yeah.
up. The all breed shows have a 5,000 dog limit, and they're getting very close to it, and they don't even close till Wednesday.
Wow, that's
So it will
crazy.
be a super event again. I mean, it's something wonderful for the whole dog sport. We cover just about everything. We've added fast cat. We have diving dogs. We have obedience. We have rally. We have juniors competition in almost all of those elements. We have a week long judges seminar thing, which I know a lot of your listeners in Canada take part in as part of their ongoing continuing ed. It's just a great event. Lots of social things and fundraising. Canine Health does a dinner. The delegates meeting is there. I mean, it's a dog convention, and it's the same sort of thing. If you build it, they'll come.
That's
This
right.
was the whole show itself, for those who don't realize it, was a vision of Ron Menaker's in the early 2000s. And the delegate body supported it, and they created the only show the American Kennel Club puts on. And it's a show that Ron knew, and although they offered a best bred by competition in a unique way, any dog, as long as it was shown by its breeder owner, not just from the bred by class, had the ability to be eligible for it, and it's become the breeders' showcase. It's there are in the 20 years, I would say it's in the top four dog events in the world, and
Oh, there's no question. Yeah.
we all know who the major ones are, and they're all very unique and very important to the dog sport. And they all have their own little flair and panache and attraction. And it's nice to be a part of it for sure.
Oh, it's definitely been an event that's well, exactly the last 20 years has stayed on my calendar. So I look forward to it, like those the other shows. What do you have a final entry number for us or no?
You're not the PR department, are you?
No.
No, it's going to come out soon. It's another record-breaking entry.
Okay.
But we will let the PR department share. I mean, there are some exciting things. Every dog breeder has an entry, which is hard. I mean, probably, and you should love this because you're Canadian. Um, we have an entry of 8 Chinooks.
Oh wow.
I mean, most people listening to this may never have seen one in the flesh, but there's an entry of 8 of them, and that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Well,
Yeah. So, uh, so I forgot what the original question was.
I was just asking about the
That's
event.
going to
So
happen a lot during this conversation, and you better talk fast because an hour will go very fast in what I have in my head.
all right. Well, let's start then, Michael. Let's tell me how, like you said, most people know, but I want the ones that don't know. Let's find out how you got started in this sport of dogs and how old you were when you got started. I guess you were a baby, you were born.
Well,
And
Well, I'm over 60 years involved. So I say in jest, but it's kind of absolutely accurate. I could be a poster child for those long term participants in the sport. I was a child in a family household that got their first dog, and it came from the Grandeur Kennel, which is my affiliation to this very day through very different iterations. But the story goes, my parents went to Sunny Shays to get an Afghan puppy, and my father and mother were looking at this group of puppies. And my father says to Sunny, "How old is that? How much is that puppy?" And she says, "Dearie, that's $100." And he says, looks around. He says, "Well, how much is that puppy?" "Honey, that one's $150." And so Jim says, "Well, what's the difference between that one and this one?" She says, "Well, that one is a good family dog." He says, "This one has show potential." And so Jim says, "Well, which one should I get?" And without skipping a beat, she says, "Dearie, get the show dog. You'll see the world." Here I am. I mean, and most people that you would be interviewing start that way. And my brother and sister were involved. They didn't stay involved in the showing aspect, but the wonderful dog owners. A few of my sisters had three generations of household Dalmatians, all purebred from top breeders on. My brothers had not Yorkies, Maltese and Shih Tzus, and they all owned an Afghan at one point in their life. So, and then, my parents bred five generations under their own Kandahara kennel name, did their thing. Lee went on to judge. My dad went on to judge. And I joined forces with Roger Reckler after Sonny died. Roger started with the Grandeur dogs in the mid
What
30s.
year was that you joined Roger?
Um, Roger got his first dog in 1972 from Sonny, but it wasn't until 75 that had one that he was going to show. And then Blue Shaw was born in 77. I showed Blue Shaw for Roger and Sonny before Sonny died, but Sonny died showing him and Boy Blue as at under Sandy Schwartz in Greenwich in 1978. And that's when the decision was made. Do I leave the veterinary practice I was involved with and show dogs exclusively for the Grandeur Kennel, which I did. And now I'm dealing with the third generation of Rogers' family. His wife has an active interest in the dogs, still campaigning and living with them. So they sleep on her bed. And his sons all owned dogs over the years with them. The three sons owned Trist, who's the top winning hound of all time. So it's everything I've done is involved around a family nucleus that had an interest and were successful breeders for all the right reasons. And that's what you want. I mean, they're a great. I turned a profession, as a handler for exclusively for the Grandeur kennels, but I never lost my breeder instincts. I was totally ingrained in the aspects of the breeding and conditioning and showing, and that's what you could understand it. But in the older days, and I hate to phrase it that way, but they were kennel managers. I managed 20, 30, 40 dogs. I mean, Sonny had more great kennels in the past who could afford it and had the room, had more. And that's how you develop the line. And Roger and Sonny would represent Grandeur as a quote, a pure strain within the breed. They didn't go out. They had enough dogs where they could find things. They went out when they had to.
Mhm.
And a major thing that I speak about is the fact that the breeding program was established and founded on Lloyd Brackett's theory of breeding better dogs. And that brings you along to a very intense inbreeding program. And we followed the basics. You never breed anything without a perfect temperament. These breeders don't understand sometimes the importance of a temperament. We don't care how good or structure or how beautiful it is, but if it doesn't have a sound temperament, it has zero value. And hard choices had to be made. If something crops up and you eliminate it from the breeding program, and then there's the type where if you want something, you may do a tight inbreeding, father daughter type thing, and you got your typical beautiful heads and you got your pretty short backs, but you really needed big feet and you really wanted a little bit better shoulder. But the one with the big foot and the good shoulder had a bucket head and kind of little long. Well, guess what? You had to know enough to keep that one, bring it back into the line. Whether you showed it or not wasn't important. It was genetically, it had to contribute because you knew you were taking it back in the line closely, and the next generation was you got to where your ultimate goal could have been. And if you didn't, you'd be out of business and you'd go find a different way. So we've been very fortunate, and we were solid breeders and unfortunately tough breeders, because at some point, and there's a story behind it if you want me to go on, in the
I
early
do.
years, um Sonny had sure kind of grandeur. And Sunny was a controversial person. She was colorful, she was entertaining, but she was serious and she was a fabulous dog woman. But she wasn't a good housekeeper. We'll leave it at that. She wasn't good at paperwork. We'll leave it at that. But there was always a story behind Sunny. And if it wasn't a colorful personal one, it was like, oh, that's really not a Shere Khan son. Sunny's got three others that look just like him, blah, blah, blah. So Sunny, having heard these stories, goes to California in the 50s or maybe his early 60s then, and breeds two to three bitches right there in front of God and everyone with Sircon. And that established the Akaba line, and that established a lot of bloodlines that, down through the years went to, produce great coastwind dogs with that cross. And so she was, and Sircon was a public stud, and he held the record for the top producer for many years. But then somewhere Sonny got disillusioned or disappointed that nobody ever came back. I mean, someone who was so important for them to intensify a line and make it recognizable, they didn't bring daughters back to Shere Khan. They didn't do a repeat breeding. So she said, they all went around circumvented to different Shere Khan sons of things. And she says, okay, they don't want them. We don't have to give it to them. So Roger was much firmer. We had Blue Shah and we had a couple really solid, tightly bred grandeur dogs at the time. And we said no stud services, no puppy sales. We just did it all on our own. We talked about doing a public stud towards the end of when we saw a breeding, you know, what do you call it, due date, end date on it. And we said, let's do a dog that we make a public stud, but we're going to do a different spin. We're going to make them buy two stud services that they're entitled to repeat the breeding or breed back to a daughter. And that would make that dog the top producing sire and, establish a consistent look. And then the more we thought about it, we thought, well, in 5 years, they'll dilute it and it won't be what we want. So we never really did do it. So, and that's kind of the way we were. I mean, we have very strong theories on breeding. And the interesting thing, and I talk about this a lot, Sonny didn't do it. Didn't do frozen semen. I collected frozen semen from Blue Shar on down, but I never did artificial inseminations. We were kind of believers if they were healthy and they could be bred, then if they needed a C-section or got a pyometra, we took them out of the breeding program. There was no, you wanted healthy litters and healthy brood bitches. But when I was on the road and the bitch came in season, like when I was in Spain for the World Dog Show in '82, and I had Blue Shaw with me, we did a frozen semen litter or something like that. And now we're doing, not just us, but a lot of breeders, and I saw it with an Irish setter breeder recently. We're doing what I call back breeding. We're using 30, 40-year-old frozen semen. And now, because we can't do the tight line breeding or inbreeding, some countries by restriction outside of a personal choice, or some people just don't have the room to carry that many dogs to do it. And so I call it back breeding because we're reintroducing great dogs from the past back into the pedigree. It's not the thoroughbred formula, but it brings it back. I mean, Triumph was bred to the thoroughbred formula, and we inbred him to many of his daughters. And
Can
so
you
now,
interrupt for a second? Can you explain the thoroughbred formula?
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend to any serious breeder listening to this. You can get it online. You can Google it. It's Lloyd Brackett's series of articles, "The Art of Breeding Better Dogs." And the first step is to take breed a male whose sire is the same as the bitch's maternal sire. So when we took a Blue Shaw son, Sharp of Grandeur, whose father was Blue Shaw, who, by the way, his mother was a Blue Shaw daughter. And that's a separate point. This was a little bit further into the intensification of the inbreeding. And we bred him to a bitch that was imported from Spain. Not imported, a bitch who was sent to Spain to be bred to an old Turkmen dog, but whose mother was sired by Blue Shaw. So TR, that's why he's TR, tried. Everything was triple on Blue Shaw.
Oh
And,
wow.
and so that's the first step. And you can convert it. He'll claim it's not as intense if you bred a bitch whose mother was sired by the dog you're breeding to's father's sire, something like that. But the thoroughbred formula is pretty straightforward. Pat Trotter used it, and I'll give you a little story. Years ago, I tried to buy. I won't even say I tried to buy this bulldog now because that's the punchline. Years ago, I saw this pedigree in a bulldog magazine, and I look at this pedigree. I said, "Holy shit, that's a thoroughbred formula in bulldogs. I never heard of this in a bulldog breed." And I look at the dog, and that was the key, dog that was bred through. And I send an email to or a letter, whatever, to the woman who had the litter. And I said, "I'm really interested how this litter turned out." I said, and I explained my interest in the thoroughbred formula and bulldogs. I had that point I had owned and shown the bulldog already. And she writes back, says, "Michael, the dog you're asking about is a dog you tried to buy at the Jersey Specialty, 8 years ago or something like that." So I like this dog, and then on top of that, he probably still could be the top producing bulldog in the U.S. He was that great a dog, and you utilized it, and you know, interesting stuff that follows you around. But that's our dog world. There's
Yeah.
lots of interesting stuff. Some we can talk about, some you can only play after 10 p.m.
Well, don't worry. This is like I'll go through this before we air it. No, it's gonna be great. Because you went through the breeding with Roger and Sonny. I want to know about you showing the dogs now. So, the first dog you really campaigned for Roger was,
Blue Shaw of Grandeur. You
and
know,
how did you guys
I
decide
showed
on
him
him as the first one?
all right, and here's how special this dog was. All right, I'll go back to the introduction to
And what
Blue
year
Shaw.
was this? I'm sorry, 78?
Oh, 1978. He was born in August of 77, so it was before that. It was late 77. So Sonny, that dog was co-bred with Priscilla Senor in Kansas. It was a boy blue litter sired by one of her dogs that went back to Turkmen. So Sonny was already interested, and she got puppies from it. Now here's a Sonny story. Sonny went to pick up the litter, and the crate wouldn't fit in the back of she was driving some big sedan, whether Oldsmobile or Cadillac, I don't know what. But Sonny had no alternative, so she split the crate in half and put all the puppies in the half and closed the trunk on them and drives up with these 5 black puppies squawking out of the back of the trunk of the car. They didn't know they were puppies. So Roger at this point calls me and says, well, let me back up because this you'll want to know. It was how I got so close to Roger and the family. Roger was with his second wife at the time at a specialty in Arizona. And I was out there with one of my mother's dogs that I owned, 2 of them, I think, at the time. And had never met Roger, but I had heard about him. And his wife, a very nice young lady, showing this very gangly, short back, ring-tailed puppy that's bouncing all over the place. Very typical what we call monkey dog. And Roger standing next to a group of people, and I could hear them criticizing. That's a grandeur dog. Oh my God, look at this and look at that. And really, and Roger was listening to it. And many years later, through my relationship with Roger, I knew this was a tell. He was rubbing his cheek with his thumb, listening to this. And um, I went over to him after the show or towards the end of the show, and I introduced myself to him. And I said, I'm Roger, I'm Michael Canalizo. Oh, I know who you are. Sonny's told me a lot about you. And I said, well, good. I said, but I want you to know, I heard those people talking about your puppy. I said, don't listen to them. They don't know the grandeur line like I do. And I said, that's very typical of what this a grandeur puppy looks like at that age. And this dog, give him time. It will, just giving him a little support. And his answer to me was, oh, he says, well, he thanked me and he says, Sonny just sold me a puppy. She says it's the best one she's ever got. And I looked him dead in the eye and I said, Roger, I don't know you, but I understand you're a man of pretty good wealth. I said, and if you're a wealthy guy, I have to assume you're a smart guy. I said, but I'm going to tell you right now, all your money and all your knowledge can't beat Sonny at a game of selling a dog. I said, that woman has a great dog to sell the moment the dog food bill is due. I said, that's all I'm going to say. And he doesn't say anything. He's calm. And about 3 weeks later, I get a phone call from Sonny. Hey, kid, I don't know what you said to my guy Roger, but he's having a Christmas party and he's insisting that you can bring your parents to be there. And I said, Sonny, I can't go. I said, I'm teaching a rotation in the University of Pennsylvania, and it's the final for the radiographic technique course. And so she says, you got to be there. I'll send a car for you. I'll do this. I'll do that. And so as it was, I was able to go. And that started it. And so when now the puppies come, and Roger had called Sonny, called me to come see the puppies the day they arrived. And Sonny, Roger tells me this later. I'm walking down the stairs first to go into the kennel, and Sonny's yanking on Roger's arm. If he doesn't like these puppies, everybody's going to know about it. He'll tell everybody. You never should have invited him. you know. Well, anyhow, that was the Blue Shaw's litter, and Blue Shaw was fabulous, and we knew it right from the get-go. So I was hired to show Blue Shaw for Roger and Sonny before Sonny's untimely death. And my first time I showed Blue Shaw was under Ramona Van Court. In those days, it was over 100 Afghans. He wins the 6 to 9 puppy dog class. Sandina Spellbound with Glovina wins the bred by class. And as I like to say it, it was the first lesson in freestanding that was recognized around the world. Ramona called the puppy out and called Eben out and says, let these two just stand on their own. And it was, I got my hair stands up on my arms. I remember it clear as a day. And Spellbound won the breed, and I went reserve. And Spellbound won winner's dog, and then on to best of breed. And in those days, people can say what they want about the sport. And Glovina was terribly worried that the group judge was Vance Evans, who had a heavy hand on a dog. He was well known to do it. And Glovina was worried because they dropped his crate coming off the plane and he was a little unsteady. And so Sonny went over to Vance, who she knew. And she said, look, Vance, you got a good Afghan coming in the ring. He says, you don't press on this. He's a young dog. He's not a special yet. And Vance gave him second in the group, and thanks to Sonny. And that's what you do. And a little sidebar. Roger and Sonny tried to buy Evan from Glovina. They really liked the dog that much. He was that kind of a houndy, upright dog. And it didn't happen, but on the same term, Glovina's first dog she ever bought was a grandeur dog from Sonny. Most people didn't know that either.
Oh.
That one didn't turn out, but the food bill was paid. All right. So now you want to know about the early dogs. So it was Blue Shaw, and I won my first best in show ever under a Barbara Worcester Keenan, a great opinion, a totally unknown I think it was her first best in show assignment.
Oh, wow.
And and a lot of firsts. People will say to me, which dog of the grandeur dogs is the most important one, or that you like the best, or this, and everybody had favorites. Trist was the consummate, show dog, ambassador of the breed. She loved everything, and she had a rough start in the beginning, which is a whole nother story. But that was the testament to the grandeur temperament. My mother loved TR the best. If you asked Lee, she said TR because he was the kind of dog that you'd look at and you didn't know if this dog was 40 years too early or 40 years too late. But he was an important dog. Novices would look at him and get a thrill. Old timers would reminisce about how the look. He was a very Sher Khan type of dog with that electricity, with a little bit more angles and a little bit more power and bigger feet and different things like that. But I always gave Blue Shaw the credit. I mean, he was impeccably bred. He was just a gorgeous, gorgeous, well-made dog. He was of size. I mean, and I was up against Kabiksa Challenger, another wonderful Afghan, called his call name was Pepsi. But Blue Shaw was black and Pepsi was a nice flashy black and tan. And not to be disrespectful, because I had a lot of regard for Pepsi and Chris and how they as breeders were successful. But somebody once said to me years later, if Blue Shaw was a black and tan, Pepsi would just be another soft drink. Meaning that the color wasn't a favorable color, and obviously that's changed. um, and in respect, you campaigned hard and heavy, and I think it was a kinder and gentler nation time back then, campaigning that level. And from Blue Shar, I finished many dogs and won a lot of specialties when we were doing some important breedings. And Trist's mother was a product of Blue Shar bred to a beautiful bitch that came from my mother's line. And we repeated that breeding 3 or 4 times. So, and Trist was one of four four black bitches in her litter, and they all had to begin with TR, and we called them the Slut Sisters. They were all black, and their names was Trist, Trollop, Tramp, and Trixie. So, those are the four Slut Sisters. You had to keep entertain yourself in the kennel, and they all finished. And two of them I almost put higher than Trist in certain elements of conformation that we liked and we bred from. But Trist, as I said, had that winning attitude. I mean, she caught some sort of parvo or respiratory thing at the show in Philadelphia, and she was rushed from the bench show to, luckily, Josephine Dubler had her hospital right there, University of Pennsylvania. Josephine told me, Joel Fisher took her to the vet for us while I was still showing dogs. I was showing TR. And she said, Mike, you probably should put her down. It doesn't look like she's going to make it. And we said, give her one more day. And every day she got stronger and stronger. And most people don't realize that Trist was never good about having her bite shown. She would, I mean, not bad, but she just like fuss about it because she was pilled so much as a puppy and all this stuff. And I could never show her on a lead with any tension. I mean, if you watch me show her, I pulled the lead down onto her withers and gave her a little tug. But if, these people that grab the neck and they double lead them, things, I go crazy. I don't like it in my ring as a judge. I think it takes away from the natural carriage. And it's not just Afghans and Bassets. I tell them, give them their head. I want to see that head go forward. And sporting breeds, sporting breeds, they don't have to have that head thrown back. They're supposed to get the scent coming in. And I'll be doing a sporting breed, and I say, bring that head down. I want that nose to be level to get it, not up in the air like an Afghan. So, those are quirky things about me. And it just progressed like that. And Trist was special because we ended her career after over 100 best in shows, and I had another dog, and his name was Carlos, named after Carlos de Bango. And it was Too Good to Be True of Grandeur was his name. And the reason his name was that was because he was a black masked silver, the most beautiful blonde. And over the years, because of the inbreeding, that color was not prominent. Black and brindle became our prominent colors. So he was out playing and he got whacked or hit a tree or something in the paddock. And long story short, he wound up with lung lobe torsion somewhere, and he survived it. And he had produced a couple champions, but I couldn't make it predictable to take him on the road
Mhm.
flying and doing all the stuff that. So we had Rings True, another a double TR daughter that was very successful, and she went on to win lots of Best in Shows. She was the youngest Afghan to win a Best in Show at the time, and then we decided, when Carlos didn't pan out, let's bring Trist back out. Trist came out and won 53 more Best in Shows at 9 years of age in full coat. She had two litters in between, and that's something in Afghans you just could never do. So that was her success there, and then then I was getting close to wanting to stop, and a couple of years ago, the last grandeur dog was like 12 years old, and Evelyn wanted another Afghan. We said, let's do a breeding, and the Vaqueros were. They got their first dog in the early 70s from Sonny too. And they had a good litter, and it was down from a dog I was particularly fond of that I put up at the World Show. And we leased this bitch and co-bred it with the Vaqueros, and we had a litter of 8 dogs finished, and lots of major winners, Best in Shows and specialties, and a number of them. So that brings us up to the current time. We still have dogs in the house, and if we know at our age now, now we're faced with the dilemma, are these bitches ready to be bred, and should we, and do we want another litter? I'm 70 years old now. Those dogs lived, sister lived to be 21, you
Wow.
know. So okay, next question.
Well, we talked about the breeder, Michael, and somewhat of the handler, Michael. Judging. When did you start judging?
Started judging in 2000, and I had 2 groups by 2005, and then I stepped away and went to be an AKC rep for a couple of years, and then after that, while I was still a rep, I segued into the position of AKC event management, which was essentially putting on the dog show with Royal Cane. At that time, Eukanuba. It
Yeah.
was a Eukanuba, and and that show itself, you know, brought in the World Challenge, made the breeder highlight, the whole thing. That's another question. But I started judging in 2000, then came back to judging in 2016, maybe. Yeah, yeah. I went from 2005 to 2016
The
working
whole
for the.
time in between you were an AKC rep, or you
Well,
gave? No.
it's not an important factor of stuff. You don't lose your rep status per se. They'd roll me out for when someone was sick or someone had to take a vacation, or they needed extra coverage. Over the years, I wasn't an active rep. But I had all the training, and so I was able to perform the functions. I mean, all of them. Tim Thomas was a rep. Dennis Sprung was a rep, and he could still be considered if he's aware of all the rules and such as he progressed in his position with the Kennel Club. So it served me well. It served me well in understanding and running a good ring. I had great friends in dogs, in Steve Shaw and mentors, and you lived it too. You had an Annie, you had a Virginia line that was one you'd follow. I mean, I remember when I started to judge, they'd say, "Go sit by Steve Shaw's ring, watch how he does it." My mother would say, "Don't be as mean as him." My mother was a great judge with a wonderful attitude. She was light, but she was serious, and she could, I'm convinced if you keep your breeder instincts when you judge, you can never go wrong. I mean, if something bothers you and you're in an Irish setter and type, confirmation, conditioning, it's going to bother me in Afghans. And if you're judging an Afghan and that would bother you in your breed, you need to weigh that against the decision here. I mean, too many times people get sucked into a winning performance.
Right.
And at some point, and it's usually 7 dogs in the end, that can weigh on a decision. But our responsibility is to judge according to how a breed can progress as breeding stock. And if you know that, a high tail set, and we all know tail sets are difficult to get rid of in a line. If you know a high tail set is on this dog, and it's there are other things on another dog that may not like, but it doesn't have a high tail set. And this is a Steve Shaw-ism. If you see something you don't like, don't point to it. You see something you don't see enough of, point to it. And all of us can put up a dog with a flaw that we know it's winning in spite of it, not because of it. But the other things carry it. And I never let a performance at the breed level take out a great example. I mean, I'll tell them, someone come up, well, my dog showed so much better. And I want to say to them, it can show better. That dog can show better or worse on a given day, but your dog will be ugly forever. I don't say that. I just
No.
say that dog will be beautiful forever. And they don't get, and I understand it. It is a dog show, and and Sandy Schwartz, and a keen competitor of mine, but also a very talented judge, he would say, "You damn well better know how to make the dog you think is best look good enough to win." And if it wasn't a great up and back dog, don't move them up and back to make a decision. Keep them in a circle. Walk down the line, and this is an Annie Clark thing. She didn't touch the things that we all see we didn't like. She didn't pound on a high wither. She didn't, pound on a sagging top line. She'd hold the beautiful head. She'd touch the gorgeous tail. Things like that. I carry a little bit of all of those kind of people, and I tell them. I mean, Janie would feel an Afghan of mine in April, or March or April, and if it was soft, she'd say, "Tough winter, huh? Bring this one back after he's been running around." So to me, conditioning is important. I can't feel an Irish setter or a pointer or something, and if it's mush, bring it back. It may be beautiful, but that's not that dog. We have to try and look at a dog, although it's on a slippery floor or on carpet or in a small ring. You have to look at it and say, could this dog do what it's bred to do? And there are signs. I mean, when I free stack a dog and I see the the nose flare on a sporting breed, or I see the Afghan hound, looking out way past whatever we're looking at into another level, looking for something to catch. Or I just recently said the same thing in another interview about a Doberman. I want that Doberman to look at me and say, "I'm watching you. I'm standing here, and I look imposing, and I look like an aristocrat, and you can touch me, but I'm watching you." And a judge has to understand the breed's function and has to respect this these things. You can't do a herding breed and not understand that you know, they know 300 feet away, 100 feet away, 50 feet away, you're worrying about them, and you have to put it in your head and develop a confidence, the same level of confidence that dog has. And there are quirky things that I try to tell new judges. When you're doing Taverns or Malinois or even Afghan hounds or the sight hounds, you need to walk that line first. They need to get a sense of you, and then they realize that their owner's calm and you're calm. And I look at a dog whose eyes start rolling at me as I'm walking down the line. I just say to the owner, he's got 30 seconds to learn to like me. And they understand that, they better relax. And it's funny, a breed like the Azawak, which is one of the breeds that are never meant to be manhandled or, pet balled, as I call it. You can see most all of it on, the standard does call for full dentition and a certain striated muscle that has to be, and skin that you want to feel. But in Europe, I put my hand on the arm of the handler and I tap it and I say, "Madam, I know this breed, and my hand's just going to leave yours and go right down onto your dog." Can't do that in the US. They'll scream some sort of, "He
Right.
touched me," but a walk down the line is good. And I'll give credit to a Canadian judge who taught me once. You have a dog that doesn't isn't comfortable with a frontal approach, they're never going to be comfortable with a frontal approach. I tell the handler, steady this dog. I don't care how he's stacked. Turn his head to the front and hold on to it, and do not let that head move. I'm coming up from the right side of the rear, and I walk wide around. And once you get the dog on the wither, and he's your hands on him, they concede, and you just run your hand down and maybe get to the testicles. This dog isn't winning, but you're giving him confidence, and
Right.
sometimes a dog like that, if it's truly the best one, there's your heartbreak in judging. This dog is really the best one in there. I'll walk down that line and I'll touch him again, and he's better. And by the third time I walk down and touch again, this dog is comfortable enough with me where he can probably receive a higher award rather than being excused. And it comes from, whatever. Dogs can react. Smart dogs react. A dog jumps at a flapping tent that snaps. That dog is smart. Dog jumps over the tape as a sight hound. I give them extra credit. That's a sight hound. He thinks there's something in the ground that he shouldn't touch. He jumps it. Others say, oh, he broke his gate. Well, no, that's bull. You don't understand what this dog is bred to do. You can't bring a sight hound running them towards the baby gates in a ring. They're going to go. You can't make that evaluation. I do a up and back, and I use a shorter mat. And there's two reasons. One, I don't want them to gather a lot of speed because the sight hound will stop and start to pull back. Two, if you don't think I can tell your dog sound in 4 or 5 steps, then you shouldn't be spending $25 to show to me. I can tell a sound dog in a few steps, but the side gate to a sight hound is going to tell you more. It's going to show you length of neck, length of back, length of legs, proper carriage, and that's where you want to make your final decision. All right, I need a drink.
That was good, Michael.
Okay, so that's my and it's pretty well known in circles now. I run a different ring. And I'm not shy. There's a method to my madness,
Yes.
and those would stop it. There are those that understand it and realize the value to it. There are friends of mine that said, Michael, I don't know. If it wasn't you, every rep would be writing you up. And I get a little testy. And I'm like, every dog is examined, every dog is moved individually. And I said, first rep that writes me up, I quit judging. And their name is going to be the first sentence of the resignation letter. I said, you can't do that. There's a reason for it. And not every, you know, it's not worth explaining this, but if you haven't shown to me, you better come watch my ring before you get into it if you want to be prepared. I don't hold it against an exhibitor for being like, what? But it's my ring. I'm doing it comfortable. And then if I have time, I usually tell them the great Annie Clark pattern where she'd do a major entry and she'd start sorting her dogs and she'd put her males in a certain order, and then she'd put her bitches in a certain order. And the poor schmo at the front thinks he's winning this, wherein in fact Annie would get her best males to the end of the male line and her best bitches to the front of the bitch line and make the comparisons this way instead of looking all the way here, then looking all the way there. So the dogs in the middle were the key dogs, and it was her way. She did it. Ellsworth Gamble, another one who's living somewhere in my body. It, he made freestanding an art form. You showed it. Did you ever show to Ellsworth
Yeah.
Gamble?
I was young, but yes. Yes.
You'd go down and he'd say stop, and he'd see your rear. He'd turn left and stop. He'd see your side. Turn left again and stop. He'd see your front. Come back. Can you imagine doing that in this day and age? And that's how, and another piece of Ellsworth, which to me goes back to how you have to judge as a breeder. Ellsworth was famous, and you may replay watching him judge, putting up puppies. And a lot of times it was a puppy bitch for even to be more intricate. And I said to him one time, Ellsworth, why is it always a puppy that you gravitate to? And he says, Michael, when I find a puppy of that high level of quality for that age and appropriateness, he says, and maybe the father and mother is in the ring as well, As a breeder, when you find quality in the youngest line, that's the closest to the end to move a breed forward in a positive way. So there's a reason to it, and you can't do it capriciously. If you have a good young dog and you have a couple good, wonderful specials, you move them together, and the puppy's at the end of the four males, say, and then you take that puppy and put him to the front of the line. Say, let's see these go again. That puppy isn't ready. He will be worried about things behind him. He will lose focus, and you know he's not ready. But if that damn puppy holds the shape of the breed, has the confidence of the breed, has the showmanship of the moment, he deserves to win. And if he doesn't win, at least everybody sees you considered it a good puppy. And if he wins, 5 years later or 3 years later, you'll judge a dog, and someone will say to you, you know, this is a puppy you put up at 6 months of age somewhere, so those are small little rewards. And I'm going to step back to a breeder thing, because one, you're Canadian, and so many great Canadian judges have contributed a lot. um, and and I'm sure my sister, and as of Pam Bruce, as everybody knows, is like family to me. She's had benefit of these sort of great little things from the association. I don't know if it's Bill or it's Nigel. I have this feeling it was Bill because it didn't involve any four-letter words. He'd say to you, yeah, so you knew Nigel too. He'd say to you, if you want to become a good breeder, you buy a male from an excellent breeder, and you buy a bitch from another excellent breeder that don't talk to each other. And let me tell you, that's exactly how every major kennel practically in the last 50 years was founded. I mean, and if you go back in your own pedigrees, like, oh my God, did Ted Edwards never talked to this one in Irish setters, and he bred to that dog, and look what the hell he got. I mean, it's funny, but and you
It's
also
true.
have to step out of your own breed. More people, people say to me, how'd you learn so much about these different breeds? I was fortunate to have one or two dogs at a show. I mean, they call it, oh, here comes Michael with his strung. You know what a strung is? A string of one. They'd call it a
Yeah.
they like, clear the way. Here comes Michael with his strung, and my assistant. I mean, I was very fortunate in that regard. But at a show, say I was on the Raleigh circuit, I had 4 or 5 days. I'd look for any breed. I didn't care if it was Yorkies or Great Danes or Shepherds that didn't conflict with my judging schedule, that had a decent entry, and I'd sit for 4 days and watch different people judge that same breed 4 days in a row. And I can tell you this: the judges that, if in my eye, if what I gravitated to, they found to reward, were usually good judges of my breed, and vice versa. If I saw something and it was third out of three, that judge, you normally wasn't a good judge of my breed. And that was how I learned. And then I'd spend a lot of time. It's unfortunate, and I'm not saying it's a kennel club thing, because I think the kennel club supports the breeders in the judging community very, very well. But the fancy has made it uncomfortable for judges to be in the grooming area looking at a litter of puppies hanging over an X pen talk. They've taken that away from us. I mean, most of the in the 60s and 70s and 80s, I helped lead break Lacey with Mike Kemp. He'd let me take her on the lead as she wasn't even 6 months old yet. You saw litters of puppies and you say, what can you do? What do you think? I mean, every one of my great dogs has honorary godparents. I could pick them out of a litter of eight, from not from my own breed. And those are the dogs that I call had universal qualities. And those are the ones that, established and hopefully were good producers. So the breeding aspect has to come forward. And it's a shame, you Canadians many years ago sent out a directive, you can't converse with exhibitors, and they were watching for it. That's terrible. I mean, I have lots to say to exhibitors, but it's not about individual dogs per se. It's about something special about that dog or the breed. And it's, we do the best we can, but I think the breeders make the best judges. I mean, you look at D. Hutchinson, who I'm sure you held in high regard. There were some great breeders like her. Pat Trotter has a strong opinion that most respect, that all were single breed judges. And then you get the kind that were not big breeders, but were blessed with a wonderful eye. And a Dorothy Nichols, Don Buchsbaum was not a significant breeder. He didn't breed, but he owned some good stud dogs, and Dorothy didn't have a lot of breeding behind her. But these people could find good dogs, and people. I'll share a statistics you may know, but now your audience will know. 80% of all the shows that are judged by 20% of the same people. That's a huge ratio, and it hasn't changed in 50, 60 years. And that just shows you that the fancy speaks. They will show to the ones they want. And now it's a whole nother dynamic with internet and Facebook and live streaming and all of this. You're a relatively new judge, and you're going to judge a breed that maybe is not close to your heart, but you know it, and you're going to do what you do, and 3 or 4 shows later, all of a sudden you're going to have that dog you gave 2 points to and one that you gave a reserve to, and you're going to see 2 or 3 that don't look anything like it. Those breeders sat back and said, "Oh, that Mr. Alexander, he's worked with the right dogs from what he had. We should show to him." And if you don't find it, then they evaporate. They just say he doesn't get our breed, he doesn't understand it. And so your test doesn't come from the beginning, it comes from the middle. And there's a reason why when I do German Shepherds or I do Golden Retrievers, I'll have 5 or 6 dogs on my day that aren't entered the rest of the weekend. People now know money's too short, travel's too expensive, they're going to go. And then another quirky thing that this whole internet movement did, I can go up to a Friday show in West Virginia, and I had 21 Tibetan Spaniels. I'm like, "What are you all doing and what?" They say we have a little page in our breed. We put up who's judging which weekend. We all say we want to go to that weekend. We have 3 good opinions, and they will make a concerted effort to go there.
That's
And
smart. Yeah.
and it's smart, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, in the old days, it was like you showed to every new judge 3 days, and you didn't know what they did for 3 months until the Gazette came out with the results, or if you had a rich friend that would call you, or they paid for an ad. Now it's different. Now you know the minute you point. And by the way, sometimes when you point, the second your finger gets back to your body, you realize you made a mistake. It should have gone the other way. And that's okay. That was a Jane Forsyth. She called them her do-overs. And every judge can have a do-over. You may not like it, and I'm very quick to admit it when I see something, but you can't stand there and not make a conscious decision and have to live with it. And it's usually a minor thing, but and watching Dobermans, you had the greatest talent in Gwen DeMelta. And every class, an honest, straightforward, obvious winner. Now she has to hand off 4 of those class winners to come into winners. And you look back and like, what the hell did I just do? Somebody else, they don't look like what they look like. And if you just walk up to see winners, like, oh my God, this kid knows nothing about Dobermans. Look at these horrible dogs. Well, guess what? They look perfect. And that's another thing about showing dogs. You can't criticize a dog that beats you unless you've watched it the entire time. I
Right.
mean, even dogs that you have reasons to not be drawn to can have a super moment. They can do something, but unless you sit and you watch them, you don't know. And it's a very subjective sport, and it's on the moment, and it's through the heart and the passion that we all have. And the hardest part is not to be a negative judge. You have to look at a dog and reward it for all the good things. And maybe sometimes you can get really good dogs and you do a specialty. I do a lot of specialties, and you'll get down to 2 dogs, and I'll do another up and back because I need to see something. But to me, an up and back is usually has very little value other than looking for a fault. You have to work hard to say, well, that one's tracking better, and this one's kind of hocking in a little bit, or something will come to you. When you do best in show, it's a sign. You have great dogs. You step back and one of them looks at you and just says, pick me. And that's okay. And then I'll tell you, as competitors and being in thousands of best in show lineups, we're all happy for whoever wins. I mean, it may not be you, but you're happy for the other one because they've got a good dog too. And I can pretty much say no one ever walks out of best in low saying, "Oh, that guy screwed it up." I mean, I just know it for a fact. And I had an incident once in San Antonio. Bernie Esperiti is doing Best in Show.
Mhm.
And every great dog was in there. Corky with the Bouvier, Mike Pitts with the great Cocker. I mean, it just couldn't get any better. And he sends Trist up and back, and I did my fancy turn, which, I do fancy shit. And she caught her corner of her nail on the seam of the rug. And the minute she did, she didn't yelp, but I knew it hurt her. And she started to get gimpy. It was, Janie would say she had a hitch in her get along, but this one, I'm telling you, she was not happy with it. And so I go around the ring and I keep her bounding, like so enthusiastic. I mean, you didn't have to give Tris much to get her crazy. And so I get to the ring and the others say to me, one leans over and says, "Michael, I think she's lame." I said, "I know she's lame. She hit the corner of the carpet." And so then the judge takes us around once more individually, and I'm bounding around. Now we're lined up, and he walks out with the trophy, and he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, if I ever live to judge Best in Show at Westminster, I'd want to line up this good." He says, "Every one of you are worthy of this win." He says, "But I looked and I was looking for a sign. And then one of the top dogs in here, I could see the sweat rolling right off the brow from the handler. That was me because I'm dying to get out of the ring.
Yeah.
And Hound is Best in Show. And I'm dying. And everyone, I could hear the buzz around the thing. So a week and a half later, we go to Ravenna in the indoors in the IX Center, and it's 110% humidity. It's sticky hot, and we're inside on that concrete floor. And Paul Edwards is in with his beautiful standard poodle bitch, and her spray is drooping down, and she doesn't want to run. He gets to the end of the line. He says, "Oh my God, I just want to dig a hole and jump in." He says, "She looks awful." Best in Show to the standard poodle. I'm over it. So it happens. It's
Well,
a
for
dog
sure.
show. Move
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
It's amazing how much that happens. And when you're out there, well, you know as well as I do, you think, "Oh my God, I'm not winning this." But they saw something.
But in the same vein, I was in a group with Blue Shaw. Del Bladowski was judging. Didn't place. He just placed 4 dogs. Didn't place. Didn't make a cut. Following that was on Sunday. The following Friday, I win a group at another show, and he's doing Best in Show. Boom,
Oh,
like this, I go Best in Show. And I was like, "You got to be kidding me." He says, "That hound group last week was so tough." He says, "I had 8 or 9 dogs there that I could have given first to." He says, "I'm so glad you won the group today." There you go. And then, and to flip it, Lee gives Tommy O a Best in Show with one of his good Siberians, and the next day she's doing the working group, and she does her thing, puts this Portuguese water dog in front of Tommy, and somebody says to me, "Oh, look it, she's gonna scare Tommy." I said, "No, no, Lee's not scaring anybody." And I said, "That dog," says, and she gives us the Porty first over the Siberian, and the guy's like stunned. And Lee says to him, says, "Why do you look so surprised?" "Well, you gave the Siberian Best in Show yesterday." She looks at him and says, "You weren't in there." you know? Let
yeah.
judges just judge the dogs, regardless. And if you don't like them, you're empowered not to go. And you'll make that judge one of the 79% or 19% of the ones judging. Don't show the bad judges, and then people won't ask them.
Yep. Wow. That's great, Michael. Before we go, though, I want you to tell me about that painting behind you.
This painting is a partial of the famous can't remember who did it, but Cynthia Wood donated it to the Santa Barbara Kennel. Well, she's donated to the AKC Museum, and it hangs there. And Carlos DeBango had a replicator do it. There's a third Saluki in the back that has kind of a vicious mouth with open like hunting mouth, and she didn't put that in it. But I got that when Carlos passed. I went on one of my visits to see him, and it was all rolled up in a tube. And he said, "Take this home," and I took it home, and Lee hung it for a while, and now I'm living in Lee's home in Florida, and it stays with me, and it's got a special place.
Can
A
you
lot of
tilt
memories.
your camera up so we can just see a better view of it? The other way. There we go. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and it's large. I can tell. I mean,
yeah,
it's about a 4 foot painting or something.
yeah,
So
yeah.
anyhow, all of us have wonderful dog art, and the dog sport's been good to all of us. You can go anywhere in the world and find our common denominator with the same passion and love, and it's great. I mean, I've seen you at Crufts. I mean, we go to Crufts, and I try to get to as many world shows. I've shown at them, and I've had the great benefit to have an upcoming Crufts assignment for my breed in
Oh,
25, and I will have judged at every one of the shows you dream of on your bucket list, and that's a nice testament. And and I'm also very supportive of judges who still should exhibit. People ask me all the time, "Do you mind having a judge show to you?" I said, "No. Those judges are closer to the breed. They need to stay involved. I mean, there's nothing worse than not being involved or owning dogs and things like that."
well, I think it's important too. I was talking about this with a friend of mine. It also puts a perspective in when you're defeated by a certain animal. You have a new view of that dog now because you're a judge as well. You're not just having your own personal passion getting in the way and oh, I got beat by that dog. You sit back and you remember, like you talked about earlier, if I liked your Afghan and I watched it for 20 minutes, well, as a judge, you don't get to watch them for 20 minutes. Right? You get to watch them for 2.5 minutes. And I
And
think it puts a new perspective on things.
and I like your rationale as perspective because it's 100% on the money. But then there's also the appreciation for a judge that can give a high level award to his own breed and not his own breeding. I mean,
Right.
when I see a shepherd breeder put up another shepherd for a high level, they know how good that dog is, and maybe they never bred to it, maybe they never owned one from it, but that's a true testament when you can put up your own breed in a competition, because that means more. It's like the same thing. What do are your specialty wins more important, or your all breed best in shows more important? I want a dog that can win both, and I had most of them could and did. And it's kind of sad this current state of affairs. In 1979 to 1983, you needed 93 Afghan hounds for a 5-point major. You needed 35 for a 3-point major. Now you need 6 for a 5-point major. I mean, and I dare say probably, and it's probably you push a button, you can find out, probably 70% of all the breeds being shown now are minimal amount of points. I mean, with the exception of some areas with labs and Dobermans and maybe Shepherds, and 4 dogs is 3 points everywhere. And hopefully it will. I do think, before we end this, I do think we're having a bit of a renaissance as a judge, and I do almost 100 shows a year. Um, I see more new people showing their own dogs, and that's encouraging because that means we are a graying sport and people worry about it. But I do think there are people out there, and maybe if it's not going to make it as a confirmation dog, we have so many other competitions, that the fly ball and the fast cat, and I love the fact that I'll put up a borzoi and say, oh, she's the top courser. And again, that goes back to, well, I can tell because of the muscle, and I can tell because of the good construction. And your dogs are having titles on both ends and finding other things to do. We've all added the selects and the owner handled things and keeping them more involved. And it's good. I think the sport is in a good place and hopefully will grow.
I
But
agree. Thank you.
in
Thank you very much.
closing, the people that are listening to an interview like this are probably more experienced and more involved and have some years behind them. Those people got to get off their butt and start fighting against these animal rights people. We've sat complacent too long, and they have gotten a foot up on us in a big way. And when I see FCI not allowing docking and cropping in every country now, that's a major thing. I mean, those great Doberman breeders in South America, they're going to find another breed. A good breeder can do it, but we can't let these animal rights people overcome we'll become a boutique, industry, but those people, when they hear there's a hearing coming up, write that letter, send that email to your congressman or whoever's trying to stop breeding and banning. It's important. And then if they don't do it, we have nobody to blame but ourselves.
Good point, Michael. Well, this was great. I'm glad. I'm thankful you gave me this time. I know you're really busy right now, so I'm really happy you put aside this for me because this was a great interview, and I really appreciate it.
Well, I hope I covered some things, you can have a part two down the line, you
Yeah, I think we
know.
should. But that was great. That was like me going to school. It was excellent. I loved it. So,
Yeah. Well, great. Thanks for thinking of asking me, Will.
well,
See you in a
thank you,
couple of
Michael.
weeks in Orlando then.
All right, take
All
care.
right. Take care
Thanks,
now. Bye.
Michael. Bye bye. Thanks, Mike. That was incredible. I knew it would be, and I'm glad I could get you to do this for us because it was like going to school myself. It was wonderful. If you like what you're seeing here, make sure you press the like, share, and subscribe button. And don't forget that we have a website, dogshowtips.com. And don't forget the podcast on all your providers, The Dog Show Drive with myself and Wayne Kavanaugh. Until next time, guys, take care.